Hello, I'm Jules. Welcome to The Secret Mind. And today I'm testing out a new microphone system. So I'm hoping this will be a bit of an improvement again, incrementally. So I'm going to do a few poems for you. Now, remember, regular viewers will know I was doing Henry Normal's collected poems. So I'll try and be a bit punchier with them and just do one of the ones where I know they've got some appeal to me. So if somebody does a big body of work and then you grab the constellation of stuff that really appeals to you, then you've really got something, and that hand grab of their bigger body of work will find its own different audiences. You have to curate your own selections of people's work, don't you? Nobody likes every song your favourite band has ever written. Nobody maybe likes every film your favourite movie star's been in. So this will be my curation of his work, because he's done a lot of stuff and it isn't all going to connect, and it's probably going to connect at different times of your life as well. So if you keep the book and you don't hand it in, hand it over, send it to Oxfam, then you might reconnect with it. But it needs to have enough to grab you in the first place, otherwise you might dismiss the artist or the art. You might dismiss all of poetry. You wouldn't dismiss all of music, but you could easily dismiss all of poetry after a bad experience, or all sorts of art forms that you could mention. Opera, improv. You could dismiss all sorts of things out of hand based on very limited experience. Poems, at least, are brief generally, so you can dip in and see if there's a few there. And if there's a few there, blame them for not connecting with you with the others. It's not your fault. And it has to be somebody's fault, doesn't it? So this is his. So as I mentioned before, he has some things where it's just the final line. Sometimes it feels like it's worked backwards. I'm going to do this one. I'm not sure about the title, but see if it reminds you of the same scenario that I think it's supposed to. We'll see. They're not long. Here we go. 2 feet. Here we go. 2 feet from certain death. 2 feet of existence, not menacing, but matter of fact. The choice is always as narrow as this, only here you can measure spirit. The grass leans outward, the cliff, jagged with purpose, penetrates the waves. 2 feet of lies and soft options, 2 feet of fear and pulse. There is a truth that's too easy to forget until you fill your lungs with determination. At times such as dusk, there is wonder in the commonplace. Rain hangs on the skyline. Beauty is always this short a distance. I've spent my whole life trying to enter the gates of heaven, using my heart as a battering ram. 2 feet of the attainable. 2 feet from acceptance. You notice when you start reading poems that it has a slightly hypnotic effect on you. And you do get into the rhythm, even without rhyme. I don't think there were rhymes there, which means there probably were there and I missed them. But it has a hypnotic effect, and it drags you in and it forces you to think about what it's about. And I could see somebody standing on the edge of a cliff by the time we're halfway through that. The poem's called Flux Could Kill. I'm not sure that helps us. And I assume that once you're in the cliff, you then pull out the reference to something a little bit broader. And the other thing I notice about that is you get what I'm calling the rallentando effect. At the end of poems, rallentando is a musical direction for slowing down, usually at the end of something, the end of the final bars of a musical piece. So you feel at the end of that. I mean, the penultimate 2 lines are the best. I've spent my whole life trying to enter the gates of heaven, using my heart as a battering ram. 2 feet of the attainable. 2 feet from acceptance. You're almost performing that rallentando effect, but I think when Henry Normal does it, he might be just as likely not to do that. Slightly over-dramatized. Pause for the camera. Couldn't you just say, using my heart as a battering ram, 2 feet of the attainable, 2 feet from acceptance, and leave it to you to make the rest of the decision about whether you want to ham it up a little bit in your performance, or signal to people that it's coming to an end and you better have you've only got moments left to draw your conclusions about what it was about. Think about it, or don't. There's a few others where the final line is sometimes just the ones that I connect most with. Next poem ends just with the line, "We are invisible to all but ourselves." You could use that as the final line of your poem and write a completely different poem. The next one, the final lines are, "You are smiling, leaning into me, but in reality, I am leaning into you." That's a good starter position. It's its final position. And you'd end up with something much more meaningful if you just write your own with that same idea, thinking about somebody who you might be leaning into. And then he does a couple about kind of sex, really, which I don't want to be. It's all a bit, I don't want to be doing that. But I am going to read this one. Now, this is really interesting because it doesn't seem like a poem, and yet it doesn't seem like anything else. And if it's not anything else, I think generally by default, given its length, it's not that long, it must be a poem. But it's funny, and it's direct, and it's interesting and edgy. It's called The Dream Ticket. Man with obvious disability in maintaining relationships seeks all-consuming passion but will settle for friendship and the occasional shag. Doesn't believe relationships ever work but has been known to fake undue optimism. Woman must be classic beauty, half saint, half whore, or nearest offer. Must be 100% loyal but tolerant of bumbling indiscretion. Must have no friends that she wouldn't ditch just to spend a few extra seconds in my presence. Must be available to lavish attention on me whenever I need pampering. But have interesting things to do when I'm busy so that I can be entertained when we next meet. Must have no friends that are male unless they are grossly ugly. All female friends should be incredibly horny and desperate to sleep with me given the slightest chance. Must be caring and gentle in bed, but willing to be ravished, tied up, and have various substances smeared over specific portions of the anatomy. Must come very loudly every time we have sex. Must synchronize with each of my orgasms. Must groan and moan softly until the final stages, then shout such comments as, "I've never had it so good, you're so big, and God, I love you." Must burst into tears for no reason occasionally, and when challenged say, "I don't want to lose you." Must hate every one of my male friends, find them sexually repulsive and inferior to me in every way. Must understand that my female friends are just friends and that's different. Must always have a worse time than me at parties. Must hate parties, students, arty wankers, wanky art students, parties with wanky art students. Must be completely naive, innocent and optimistic, but worldly wise. Must be young at heart but sensible. Must be practically a virgin but have a sophisticated knowledge of sexual technique. Must be intelligent but not so that it makes me realise my simplistic thought processes. Most importantly, must realise that all the above is not a joke. Please send tasteful nude photo. Not my words. Henry Normal. So that's a funny piece. And you see what I mean? It sounds like a poem, doesn't it? But it must be a poem. But funny. So that's him. And let's just sit through a couple of others quickly. I found another poem book on my shelf. This is John Hegley, which I think I bought from him many years ago at a live. I used to go and see a lot of his live performances. And he'd read out his poems and do some other stuff, little drawings and little pieces and little essays. And he would write like Henry Normal about the mundane. So I'm sure they've both done several poems about just drinking cups of tea, for example. That would be absolutely typical. This was the one he was sort of rocking with at the time. He's a classic. Does he have a picture of him on here? Yeah, just about. Sticking two fingers up at the back there. A little bit rude, John. A little bit rude. But he's wearing a Roman toga, so I assume he's using that as an excuse for very poor behaviour. And he writes often about his glasses, and in defence of glasses in particular. This is called Glasses Good, Contact Lenses Bad. So he's really, he's coming for us here. And the other thing about it is poems are often better in their own voice, so you have to do a kind of impression of them. So I've got to do a bit of impression of him to get, because I think it works best in his voice, and he's not here. In the embrace of my glasses. This is the way he'd talk. This isn't me doing. This is the way he would. You know, in the embrace of my glass. Even if he doesn't talk like this, he's doing this in his performance, because obviously this is the way he gets the best out of his own material as well. So, okay. In the embrace of my glasses, I openly accept my vulnerability and affirm my acceptance of outside help, as well as providing open acknowledgement of the imperfection in my eyesight. Sounds a bit like Richard Burton. In the imperfection in my eyesight, or Anthony Hopkins. My glasses are a symbolic celebration of the wider imperfection that is the human condition. In contrast, contact lenses are a hiding of the fault. They pretend the self-sufficiency of the individual and minister unto the cult of stultifying normality. They are that which should be cast out of your vision. They are denial of the self. They are denial of the other. They are betrayal of humanity. So, and he illustrates terribly a contact lens knockout where, in his mind, glasses will always win and contact lenses, being evil, will always lose. Little extreme for my taste. I'm going to put that aside. Quite a but very, very funny chap, John Hegley. Might return to him. He does do poems that rhyme occasionally, although you can sense their fascination, can't you, with things that don't? Because they can't be bothered to rhyme. Too tricky. Having said that, right, we're back with, finally, Roger McGough. This is too childish a selection. He writes a lot of kids' poems, and they don't have the sort of, some of the depth that I'm looking for, some of them, although they're good for what they do. This does have a little bit of that, because it's about bullying. It's called The Boy with a Similar Name. And I'm going to close with this today. He's called Roger McGough. This is selected poems of Roger McGough. When Raymond Gough joined our class, he was almost a year behind. Sanatorium, said Mrs. McBride, so I want you all to be kind. Roger, your names are similar. Roger, your names are similar, so let Raymond sit next to you. He'll need a friend to teach him the ropes and show him what to do. Then teacher went back to teaching, and we went back to being taught. And I tried to be kind to Raymond, but it was harder than I thought. For he was the colour of candle wax and smelt of Dettol and Vic. He was thin as a sharpened pencil, and his glasses were milk bottle thick. Not only that, but unfriendly, all muffled up in his shell. Hobbies, interests, ambitions, it was impossible to tell. I was afraid of catching his yellowness and smelling of second-hand Vic, and the only time I could be myself were the days when he was off sick. But what proved to be contagious was his oddness, and I knew that he was a victim ripe for bullying, and so, by proxy, I was too. How's your brother, Raymond? The class began to tease. Do you share his dirty handkerchief? Do you catch each other's fleas? He's not my brother, I shouted, my cheeks all burning hot. He's a drippy four-eyed monster, and he comes from the planet Snot. They laughed, and I saw an opening. Wouldn't you have done the same? I pointed a finger at Raymond and joined in the bullying game. He stopped coming to school soon after. Sanatorium, said Mrs. McBride. He never came back, and nobody knew if he moved elsewhere or died. I don't think of him very often, for when I do I blush with shame at the thought of the pain I helped inflict on the boy with a similar name. Finishing on a bit of a downer there, guys, but it's good, isn't it? The power of words. See you tomorrow.